First of all, what an extraordinary moment to see the four founders up here. I have to confess, I had goosebumps as somebody who has in other ways been involved in founding organizations, to bear witness, also as an historian, to this day, 10 years later, is truly remarkable. So my congratulations to all four of you and to everyone in this room who has made this vision a reality. And that includes very much the gentleman to my left. And you, Hakeem, have been an integral part of this story from the very beginning. In fact, as one might say, you had a front row seat to it all, and you've witnessed the successes, the failures. In your mind, what kinds of lessons could you draw from this story in terms of institution building more broadly in Africa?
Thank you very much, Carrie. First, I would like to congratulate the four founders. They were an extraordinary group of individuals. I cannot say to you that on my very first meeting with them, they looked to me like an extraordinary group of people. They looked very bright. They looked very keen. They did look determined. Fred Swaneker looked rather young. Acha was very analytical. Peter Mombao, who combined a certain idealism with a certain Teutonic thoroughness, was the gentleman who I would say impressed me the very most. And Chris, I got to meet much later. But when they first spoke to me about this school that they wanted to found in Africa, I have to say to you that it immediately struck a chord within me, and that's partly because I attended another great international sixth form college called the United World College of the Atlantic. And one of my great passions, one of my great dreams, had been, if only a school like that for people between 16 and 18 could be founded within Africa. And so their thoughts of bringing Africa together within a school sounded for me a great thing. But when you look at a group of people who are about to set up an institution, what are you looking for? For me, four things I'm looking for. Three I saw immediately. The first you're looking for is, some people call it the vision. I rather describe it as the driving dream. Do these guys have a driving dream that motivates them? And that I saw very quickly in the three of them. The second thing is there a great team that can realize that driving dream? And within these four guys, I saw an Anglophone African and a Francophone African. So I felt that Africa would not be divided within this group. I saw a European and I saw an American. So I felt that the Atlantic will be united behind this dream. I saw a visionary in Fred. I saw an obsessive compulsive in Chris. I saw a very analytical person with Peter, and Acha, of course, is immensely charming and intelligent. So I felt that the combination of the abilities of these four people, each of their skills necessary to success, could do the job. And then the third thing I looked for very much was, could these people construct the detailed plan that moves the driving dream into the concrete reality that we see today? Now, we're told that Fred did the case on this, or he did the business plan, but I have no doubt in my mind that Chris Bradford filled in all the dots, crossed all the T's, and made sure that that thing was held together, whatever the speech they make said. And so for me, there was just one last question. Did these guys have the determination, the boldness. Were they willing to risk comfortable jobs in order to get this thing done? And I think that the minute I got that phone call from Fred Swaniker that he was not going back to McKinsey, he did not mention to me that he was a debtor at the time. But once he mentioned that he was willing to give that all up and that Peter was willing to have his house used as an office, I knew we had the winning combination that was going to build a great institution.
In some ways, some of your remarks remind me of some others that I heard many years ago, in fact, here in Johannesburg, when I was first, just before I was introduced to Fred, by our mutual friend, the late Jennifer Oppenheimer, who was a very big believer in this project. And I remember at the time, I too was chasing a dream at Harvard. We were building a Center for African Studies, and Jennifer and yourself were two initial very big supporters of this. And the caveat was, Jennifer, was, yes, I'm going to help you, but only if you do work with a guy who's going to sit to your right at dinner, Fred Swaniker. And she said, he has the magic. He has the dream, he has the vision, he has this team, and I want you to learn from him. And it was in that context that she also said, and it's a phrase she used often, she said, the ALA is like a moonshot. And I know that we were talking about this the other day, and you were also reminiscing about this moonshot. What did she mean by this? The ALA was a moonshot.
I think what she meant by this I think that what she meant by a moonshot is that it was a seemingly impossible dream. It was something that demanded that all the intelligence, that all the character, that every fiber of their being had to be brought in play in order to get to that position. It might take 10 years, like it took the United States to land a man on the moon, but it needed that determination to get there. And she felt that, yes, they were pointed in the right direction, but there were a million calculations that they would have to make to land that man on the moon. And she was very clear in her mind that they could do it. And I shared that particular view as well. Alongside that view was my sense that there's a certain attitude that you need to have in order to be successful in these circumstances. And the story that Fred told about 5 million rand, 3 days, needed 3 days in order to make the difference between success and failure, to me is classic in the kind of attitude you need, which is that ability to live and to walk through the fog of uncertainty, not knowing what the next day will bring towards you, but that sense that nonetheless you are going to take difficulties as they come along, confident that you will overcome them. I heard this story about the 5 million rand just this morning. I have to say to you, Fred and co, that I was most impressed with that figure, and I became even more impressed when I reflected on what the exchange rate must have been 10 years ago. So well done.
Well, building on this, thinking about that fog of uncertainty, the challenges that one has to overcome, and the vision, the passion for that, the degree to which there's the passion, the vision, but then there's the realpolitik of what that means on a day-to-day basis. And in many ways, we look out, and I've sat here, and it's been a wonderful reminder over the last 24 hours of the way that the ALA has already invested in 1,000 young leaders who are impacting already the world in a variety of ways, from from music albums to running for political office, a whole range of things. And even though they're still incredibly young, and I think, my gosh, I mean, it's incredible to see the passion and also the ability to imagine the possible. And as you and we all look forward together, how do you see these young leaders? And how do you see them moving forward in the kind of vision that was articulated so well by our visionaries of really, in some ways, the bottom line purpose of the ALA, and that is African leadership?
Carrie, before I answer that question, I think what I would like to share is a sense of what makes great schools, great educational institutions, different from good educational institutions. And I think that distinction between the great and the good ones is central to what ALA is doing. And let me just try and put it this way. Good educational institutions, they have a number of things that they are trying to do. But broadly speaking, they are trying to give students certain skills with which they become employable within an economy. They are able to contribute to the economy, and they are able to, in a sense, feed, in the most basic sense, themselves and their families. And all good institutions have that at the very center of their raison d'etre. But there are a special group of great schools, and I think ALA has demonstrated that it is one of those that have something more special than that. And that is that what they are trying to do is that they are trying to develop young people who have a dedication to certain goals that are beyond themselves. And in this case, it's the passion and the dedication for Africa. These great schools have to evoke in the young students their imagination, to make them think of a world as it should be, not necessarily the world as it is, and ask them to conquer the world as it is, but to imagine the world as it should be and give them the task of creating that world. And when you walk around this community or walk around this school, the thing that strikes me is how many of the students, and you can feel it in them, are already imagining the things that they are doing, the things that they want to do. They are imagining the kind of Africa that they want to create. And the school has given them that confidence that they can do that. And all great institutions leave students with that confidence that there are no goals that are beyond them, and that the new world that they want to create can and will be created by them. And I have no doubt whatsoever in my mind that within this room, the present students of ALA, the past students of ALA, and the future students of ALA will, in fact, remake this continent in the image that they have determined is best for Africa. Now, Carrie, on your side, you too have come out of some great institutions. And I think that it would be lovely if you could share some of your experiences in the great institutions that you have attended, so that the ALA community can understand that what they seek to do is in fact part and parcel of a wider drive for excellence, a wider drive for achievement within the whole world.
Thank you, Hakeem. When I think about, and I think so often what happens is when you come to any celebration such as this, you have moments of reflection. And, Yesterday evening, I was thinking about the day, and I was so deeply affected by the experience of being in the classroom with the students. And it made me think in that moment, we were discussing, as you remember, the students were discussing Neri, and they were imagining a future of the possible. And it brought me back to the days when I was about their age, and I was heading off to university. Came from a lower middle class high school in New Jersey. My dad was a salesman, my mom was a teacher. And my big ticket out, and I knew I wanted out. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted out of. I just knew that I had to get out of the Jersey Shore. For those of you familiar with the United States, I had to get out of there. And so I went to New Jersey at Princeton. It was pretty far on a relative basis. But I got there and I felt so inadequate, utterly inadequate. And here I was a reasonably bright young person, and I felt so inadequate, and I was surrounded by what I thought was these students who were so more sophisticated. They went to these places I'd never heard of, Exeter and Andover, and and they just seemed as though they knew it all. But the magic of Princeton was the fact that within a very short period of time, that insecurity evaporated. And it wasn't just me, there were many other students like me. And it evaporated in part because the moment you walked through the gates, you were there for a greater good, bigger than yourself. In Princeton, the motto was in the nation's service. And you believed as you moved forward that your learning was something not about just material wealth or just about sort of the echo chamber of the ivory tower, which we hear a lot of. And I couldn't help but hear the resonances of something greater than oneself yesterday in the classroom just around the corner from here. As these incredible students were thinking about a future, building upon Neri's writing, thinking about how, as some of the leaders gestured, there's been failure, and how they will pick that mantle up and transcend nation, transcend ethnicity, transcend racial groups, and think about a future that tears down structures, that breaks down barriers. It's not just about tweaking and reforming, but imagining the possible, imagining something entirely different. And so when I was reflecting on this, I thought of the ALA as in the continent service, transforming, transcending, and imagining a possible that you and I couldn't have imagined 10 years ago. And to me, that's the magic of the ALA. And the magic, yes, we can sense it here, we can sense the euphoria, but also as a lifelong educator, the magic happens within four walls of a classroom. That's where it happens. And then it expands and ripples out from there. And so, to me, it's imagining that possible. And I think the great institutions, look, there are great institutions in the United States, but many of these institutions have been narrow for a long time. And I think we, both at Princeton and now in my work at Harvard, one thing I can say that Jennifer Oppenheimer was absolutely right about. My understanding and my vision about how to think about Africa came from these gentlemen on the right, and the ways in which they thought beyond sort of a particular moment in time, beyond a particular place. And I think in that sense, we must remember how much the ALA has taught great institutions in the United States and will continue to do so. I'd like to talk in a moment about this incredible network here, but I want to follow up on one point that you made, and that was that sort of that fog of uncertainty. Because I think for many who have vision, it's when you're trapped in that fog that you become anxious and that one can be derailed. So as I think about these young students in yesterday's classroom, these young students in all the classrooms that are here now, some of the recent graduates, if you were to look in your crystal ball, what are some of the biggest challenges that they are going to face as that future of African leadership? What may well be that fog of uncertainty that they will need beacons to get through? And we're going to talk about those beacons in terms of some of the networks afterward.
Yeah. they have come to an environment in which they have been taught national boundaries are not fundamental. Ethnic boundaries are not fundamental. We need to go above religious boundaries, and we need to have deep ethical concerns, and we need to lead an ethical life. And you feel that when you're here, in which you are seeing somebody from Zimbabwe mixing with somebody from Tunisia and somebody from Nigeria mixing with somebody from Zambia. And when they go back to their countries, they will find themselves challenged by many of these issues, and there will be great pressure on them to withdraw into the original national, ethnic, or class backgrounds from which they came. It is fundamental that they resist that, and it is fundamental that the training, the thinking that they got while they were at ALA remains with them, and that during the difficult times that they retain that confidence that they can take decisions, that they can go their own way, that they can proceed in the direction which in their hearts and in their minds that they feel they should proceed, but which a lot of their immediate family and a lot of their immediate friends will be saying, play it safe. Don't be daring. Yes, the stories that you heard in ALA about 5 million rand to Monday, that's all very, very fancy talk. But now it's time to be realistic. And when they hear the words, it is time to be realistic, that is the time when they should be afraid. Because what somebody is saying to them is that abandon your dream. Somebody is saying to them, reduce your expectations of life and of yourselves, and that is the time when they need to forge ahead. They need to remind themselves that they came to this community and they are part of this community in order to do something extraordinary for Africa, extraordinary for themselves, and not to be ordinary. That was very much indeed the spirit that motivated the founders of this place. That was the spirit that motivated the supporters of this place, and that spirit is embedded in every one of the graduates of this place and must remain there for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, hearing your words, I have these historical echoes of my parents. Play it safe. Stay in investment banking. Don't become an academic. And I think about the community that you just gestured to. And I look out here today, it's extraordinary. I mean, when it was reeled off, over 1,000 people, 5 different continents, 60 countries. And the dreams of young people are realized so often through these networks, sometimes from the most unlikely corners. Somebody who reaches out that hand because of the shared vision, the shared past of the ALA. And when we think about this room filled of supporters and friends and alumni, in your mind, what is your charge to us in the ways in which we need to be those individuals, that community, to help these young people as they are on a journey of transformation, both within themselves and their young lives, and in the greater good of transformation more broadly with leadership on the continent?
Carrie, I think that we first have to ask ourselves, what is the challenge that they face within Africa? What's their place in Africa's history? I think that one of the founders alluded to that when he was speaking, and I'd like to go into that in a little bit more detail. ALA students are indeed the fourth generation of Africans, I would say. I'll describe the first generation as the generation of Africans who got independence. They demonstrated that what the white man can do, the black man can do. And I'll describe the second generation as the generation of the first lawyers. They were the lawyers, the bankers, the doctors, and those who filled out the governments of Africa. They set up the governmental institutions that they saw as taking Africa to another level. That was the second generation. That generation had large problems. And a third generation then emerged, of which I am part of that generation. That generation grew up or was told that the future of Africa was in the private sector, that we had to build these private institutions which would drive the economies and replace some of the failures of the government. But for me, there's a requirement for this generation that we see in this room, and their historic task is a little bit more complicated. And they are the ones who have got to understand that the private sector cannot do well without a functioning government sector. That leadership in government is as fundamental, that leadership in education and social areas are as fundamental as leadership in business. That they cannot be measured by how many wealthy businessmen are produced, much as they are celebrated in Forbes magazine, but that businesses and individuals will be judged by the impact that they have on the bottom 40% of the population. That group and this group will be judged by the degree to which they answer the question, who is my neighbor? And they understand that my neighbor is as much the person in southern Sudan as it is the person in southern Nigeria. That all of these are our neighbors. And that they go back to do away with ethnic loyalties, religious loyalties, and build the African, who within a functioning world economy is being productive. That is the historic destiny of your generation of Africans. Now, you will be judged not so much by how far down the road you go in getting to that, but you will be judged by the determination and by the willingness to take risks in achieving that. People are judged by the extent of the goals they set themselves and by the determination and by the challenge with which they go after those goals. Now, I feel a confidence that they will get there, and they will get there with the support of all of us who share these goals as well. There will be many storms along the road, and it will be raining as much as as the sun is shining. For many times, they will wish to rush straight into a safe harbor on those occasions when it rains. But as one lovely Christmas card, a birthday card I once received, said, they're going to have to learn to dance in the rain. Realizing that getting drenched, but still keeping going, makes getting to the goal even sweeter and more beneficial. In about 30 years' time, there will be another ALA gathering such as this. I would like the news report about that gathering to read as follows. There was a meeting of the best and brightest in Africa. They were able and they were humble. They were thinkers and they were doers. And I would like somebody to respond, I know which meeting took place. The ALA guys must have been meeting.
Hakeem, on that final note, maybe I'll sort of gesture to you. I know they're looking to wrap up, but any final message directly to the students, to the young alumni, before we turn to the rest of this incredible day?
I hope that they have not all been watching me on YouTube, because I always end by repeating my very favorite sayings by a crazy old English poet. And it says, and I'll repeat it, gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Seize the times and go on and make your lives extraordinary. ALA students, please remember this crazy Nigerian interviewed by this crazy American who admonished you all. You will only fail if you seek and if you become ordinary. You have extraordinary talents, and extraordinary people have put everything in to give you extraordinary experience. And therefore, you must become extraordinary yourselves. God bless.
Thank you.